Dzień dobry, everybody. Is that right? Yes. That's right? Okay, awesome. Yeah. Applause for that, please. How was everybody's morning? Good, great, awesome. I love Professor Zimbardo's presentation. The concept of heroes, the ripple effect. The cartoon that he had of the H in the middle, creating those ripples. So pretty similar to what product managers have today, every day, right? Like you have to create an idea, you have to inspire everybody around you, and then you have to create that ripple effect. And you don't have authority over anybody. So creating a ripple without any authority is the difference between a totalitarian and a product manager. Right? So that's my takeaway from Professor Zimbardo's presentation. And then having an open culture is so important, right? Having goals, having signals and metrics, that's again like the core tenets of being a product manager. Both these presentations really opened my eyes to something, and I learned a lot today. I really hope through my presentation you guys get to learn at least a little bit. Most of it is stemmed on the experience that I have from the Bay Area and some parts of the US that I don't know if I even tell you might even not hear about it. Like Cleveland. Have anybody heard of a place called Cleveland? Like LeBron James? So there's this interesting story. I don't know for what reason, when I was working with Deloitte several years ago, I was about 20 years old. I had never stepped outside India for a single day. And then Deloitte, which is the company I was working at, decided that they would plant me in the middle of a snowstorm in Cleveland, of all places. Right? There's this guy that doesn't know how to drive, and I don't know, I've never counted money beyond an Indian rupee, and they plopped me right in the middle of Cleveland. There's a snowstorm. It's extremely cold. I don't think I had money to buy a jacket at that point of time, and I survived. That's what PMs do, right? They plant you in the middle of a snowstorm, and then there is this exec that comes in and says, hey, PM, you will save the day, I know that. Else you're fired. So some of these lessons here will help you not just make sure you don't get fired, but also be that hero in your company, be that person that creates a ripple effect and influences everybody around you, and also most importantly makes everybody passionate about building experiences that customers cannot live their life without. Now today what I'm going to walk you through is a playbook. It's not a framework. I know there are colleagues over here that hate the word framework, and I'm not going to call this a framework. This is a playbook. This is something that you can always go back to. This is your default way of thinking as a PM when you're faced with a question. I'm going to reveal what the question is, but before that, I think I should introduce myself. So my name is Shek. Thanks for pronouncing my name right. I'm a product leader at Qualtrics, one of the sponsors of this program as well. A lot of my colleagues are up there. Thanks for supporting us. I'm one of the product leaders at Qualtrics. I'm based out of Toronto. I occasionally visit other parts of the US as well, where the company is located. And I spent several years in consumer tech. I worked at a company called Zynga, which makes games. How many of you play mobile games here? Quite a few. How many of you ever played this game called Words with Friends? Wow, one person, two people. So you can think of it as Scrabble that you play online with strangers that you've never met before, right? And then you create these long, amazing friendships that last for decades. So I used to manage that game, and before that I spent about 7 years at a company called Deloitte in the consulting practice. So that's me in a nutshell. So today I'm going to talk to you about a playbook that will help you think about your product and position your product towards growth, from being just about an experience to growing and creating a business out of it. So I've worked at other companies before, not just Qualtrics. I worked at Zynga. I graduated from University of Washington, which is on the west coast of the US. A really pretty campus. The Japanese cherry blossoms right in the middle of the campus when it's spring. A nice way to get students back to school. Then I worked at Amazon for a little bit, and SAP obviously acquired Qualtrics last year. So the big question that product managers are faced with every single day, and at night too, at 2 a.m., you wake up in the middle of the night and you're thinking about, how do I know if my users, customers, or players, if you're building a game, it's players, enjoy the experiences that you're building with your product or game or service. Now this is really important. The playbook that I'm going to present here is not just for SaaS products, it's also for consumer tech. It's also for games. A lot of inspiration that I derive for this playbook was actually testing this playbook on top of several product managers that were building games. Games is an amazing way to build a product and learn a lot. You know why? You can build a game, it's extremely easy. You can launch it on the App Store. On day one, you'll have 50,000 people that download and start playing. And on day two, it's just you and your friend. Everybody's left. So it's a very difficult environment to keep those people interested in your product. So if you can survive building a game, you can build any product. That's my hypothesis. So how do you know that your customers and players or users are enjoying your product? And this is the synopsis of this entire presentation. Understanding and improving your product health comes down to breaking customer signals into a suite of metrics and identifying key levers that drive growth. It's extremely simple to understand, and we'll walk through the presentation to find out how do you break this down into a playbook. So this is a playbook. It's very similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Has anybody heard about what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are? Okay, awesome. There are quite a few of you. So it's pretty simple. It's understanding at the core what motivates somebody. And this is the product manager's frame of mind. So it starts with understanding this concept called a core loop. I'll explain what a core loop for your product is. Step one is establishing that core loop. As a product manager, you got to understand what the core loop of your product is. And you have to also not just understand it, you have to find ways to measure, put metrics around it so that you can be data-driven about it. So step two is then using that core loop and building a growth model that's based on key performance indicators from the product that's informed from your core loop. Step three is pretty simple. It's identifying levers or leverage. What's your leverage point? X plus Y plus Z leads to A. Like, is X, modifying X leads to growth of A more than Y? You've got to figure that out. And then the last thing is what product managers love doing. Prioritizing product features, building, testing, learning, and iterating. So today I'll step through all four of these and give you some examples from my past and walk you through the playbook. So step one. So what constitutes a core loop? So for games, it's something very fundamental. And I realize that not many of you play Words with Friends, so I'm going to step through some of the other examples. So how many of you play poker or have played poker? Okay, perfect. So you play with a bunch of cards, and then you put your hand, and then it's somebody else's turn. So it's that fundamental unit of playing a hand is called a core loop, right? For Facebook, it's that first post. You put a post on there, a lot of people come and see it. So the act of posting is the core loop. You open the app, snap a picture, a selfie with Professor Zimbardo, right? And then you post it on Facebook. So that act is called a core loop. And for Instagramming, the reason I put Instagram on here was I was teaching this class down in University of Southern California, and there were a bunch of millennials, and the examples I gave before revealed my age. And it was really examples from the past, and I felt really old, so I started putting stuff like Snapchat and Instagram. So for Instagram, the art of posting a picture is the core loop. But completing the core loop is correlated to long-term retention. And these are stats that we found from the games that I helped build and from other products that we have seen. So remember what the core loop for playing Words with Friends is? It's playing your turn on Words with Friends. Right? You arrange the tiles, you form the word, you send it over to your friend. Let's say I send it to Arjun here, and then he plays back. So we realize that if that's your core loop, And if somebody plays a word in the first 24 hours after installing the game, they're more likely to return next week than somebody who does not. So let's say I install the app today, I formed a word and I sent it to Arjun. If I did that within the first 24 hours, I'm more likely to come back the next week. So this is the difference between success and failure. If you make somebody install your product, and if they don't engage in the core loop within a set period of time, you've lost them. So you've got to find out what that gravity point is. And the same thing with Facebook. There was research done that mentioned that if a user has 7 friends in 10 days, they are more likely to retain forever. So do this experiment. Go back home, create a Facebook account, all right? And then don't add any friends. Facebook is going to bombard you with an email every day for the next 365 days, which is a suggestion of 10 friends. Where did they come up with 10 friends or 7 friends? It's this algorithm here. So if somebody adds 7 friends within the first 10 days, they're more likely to stay with you forever. So it's really important. So they identified what the core loop was, and now they're optimizing towards it. And only the core action is not important. Okay, I played my turn with Arjun. Okay, we played back and forth. Arjun won by a huge margin. I sucked. I really sucked. Now if I leave the game, two users are going to quit. So we complete the core loop, and it ended there. Unless Arjun starts a new game with me, or I start a new game with Piotr over here, both of us are lost. So just measuring the core loop is not success. You have to find the additional hook point that makes this synergistic continuation of engagement. So you've got to find out what that is as well. So combining these two elements, the core loop and the longer term investment, leads to this thing called the dual core loop. Now this is a very important principle. I'm going to stop here for a second. It's an eyeball. No, it's not an eyeball. It's a framework. You can think of users using your product engage in 2 loops. And I'm not making this up. I've tested this on more than 50 to 60 products in the Bay Area. Not just consumer products, not just games, but also enterprise applications and software as a service. So there is this thing called an inner loop. Me playing one word with Arjun was a low investment, right? Extremely low investment. Took me not more than 10 seconds, but it became a daily habit. This is an extremely low investment. Took me 10 seconds, became a daily habit. And then something interesting happened. When I created a new game with Piotr, I made a bigger investment. I'm saying I'm going to play with Piotr for the next 14 days, right? That's a bigger investment. It's not just a one-day investment. So I transitioned from the inner loop to the outer loop. This is very important. In your products, you have to figure out how you can get a majority of your users that are engaging in this inner loop to transition to the outer loop. You can take any product on the planet and you can come back to me and challenge me and tell me, Shek, this does not work. This is just stupid. This concept does not work. And I'll debate that with you for a long period of time and we'll make it work. What happens with the inner loop? Why do people continue playing the inner loop or using the inner loop? It's because the product gives them some sort of a minor reward. Now, an example I'd love to use is a task app. How many of you use some sort of app to track your daily tasks, like Wunderlist or Evernote? Awesome, it's like 80%. So you create a task, and then the next day you come back. It's a daily habit, right? You come back the next day, and then it tells you, reminds you, have you finished this task? And you say, yes. And then you get this adrenaline rush through your body saying, check mark, amazing, you're the best person on the planet. You just completed your task. That's a minor reward, right? They're not paying you money to finish your task, right? But that minor reward gives you a dopamine rush that makes you want to continue engaging with that product. As product managers, we overlook this a lot. We keep trying to build experiences where we want to take people through a loop and we want to give them a big reward. And we fail right there. Because you know why? To give a big reward, a user has to go through the outer loop. And an outer loop takes an investment. So those 50,000 people that installed your application on day one, if you did not engage them in a smaller inner loop that gave them a small reward, and if you just wanted them to take that outer loop and a big investment, a bunch of them would have left. Because a big investment is a big commitment. For me to start a new game with Piotr and saying that I'm going to play for the next 14 days is a big investment. I don't even know if I have that time, right? So you've got to lead them through small steps, give them minor rewards, and then take them to the outer loop. The reason I'm taking so much time on this is the crux of the presentation. Everything else we can sort of breeze through. This is the most important part. Our jobs as product managers don't end there. I installed this new app that you guys built. I installed 50 other apps in a month. On average, people install 63 apps a year. You're forgotten. Like, I don't even remember the name of your app the next day. So as product managers, you cannot let that happen. Right? It's awesome. Oh yeah, I just built the best experience. If you open it once, you will remember me. It's just, the user growth is just going to follow. This is something I've heard so many times, and it's always untrue. People will forget because they have short-term memory. So that's where, as product managers, you have to build triggers into your system to make sure the user engages in that user in the inner loop multiple times. And it's okay. You can be shameless. And you can build triggers, you can build notifications. There's this interesting experiment that we did with Zynga Poker. How many of you hate these notifications, push notifications that come through to your app? Okay, there's just 2 people who don't. I'm pretty sure you don't have smartphones. So, interesting experiment. There was this PM that came and said, oh, I hate spam. I'm not going to send more than 1 notification a week. Okay, good. And then there was this other PM that said, I'm shameless. I'm going to send 7 user notifications every day to get people back. We A/B tested this. Anybody curious? Anybody wants to offer an answer which one actually won in terms of long-term retention, 1-year retention? Just a guess. 7 notifications a day or 1 notification a week?
7 a day.
7 a day won by a huge margin. You know, as PMs, you have to build notifications into the system. People will forget who you are. At some point of time, Apple, cut short and 7 notifications did not work anymore. But 1 notification a week is just too few. But you got to find that sweet spot. No notifications is a failure in this model. Every notification has to lead to some activity, something that the user does with your product that leads them to do something in it. How many of you have received notifications that just says 85 people followed you today on LinkedIn? Or like 2 people followed you on LinkedIn today. How many of you have received that notification? Okay, so many of you. You open the app, what do you do with that?
Check the pictures.
Check the people, right? But do you do anything more than that?
That's the action.
That's the action. Now, I don't know if that's a good investment. That's actually a good action. Check those people. But when it becomes 85, you just cannot see all those people, right? So you start ignoring this notification going forward. Make sure you never do that. Make sure if you build a notification into your inner loop, make sure it leads to some meaningful activity, right? So that's really important. The same thing is with the outer loop. It starts with a task, and it leads to a milestone. Now, again, you cannot use the same inner loop concepts for the outer loop. You cannot have a notification every day for the outer loop, right? If you create a project plan and you have 30 days to complete it, completing it is the milestone, but you've got to take the user week by week. You have to tell them, hey, what's your 7-day milestone? What's your 14-day milestone? You have to give them small wins as you take them through the outer loop. Now, this is the whole crux of this presentation. And if you want to take a picture, I'm more than happy to do this. What I would love for you to do is go back to your products, apply this, hit me up on LinkedIn and tell me if this worked or if this did not work. Both ways, I would love to know. All right, so the second step is, now that you know what a core loop is and what action to measure, now you have to build a model for growth. How many of you have built a growth model? Perfect, Arjun. So you have an output which is usually active users. It could be one of your outputs. You're building a product. Why are you building a product? Because you want users. How do you know you will get users? You have to figure out some mathematic formula that tells you that X plus Y will give you users. So in one case, it could be you're looking at installs. There are 50 people that installed that application today. And if your day 30 retention is 2%, one person will end up as a user at the end of the month. So that's your formula. You could also think of other ways to model your growth. It could be that you have weekly active users. How many of you know what weekly active users mean? Quite a few of you. So you could measure weekly active users and then multiply that with a percentage that says, of your 100 weekly active users, if 10% of them use your product every day, that leads to daily active users. So you have to find out what that formula for your product is. But at the end, it's either users that use your product every day or every week, or it's some sort of revenue that your product is generating. And this is the formula that leads to the foundation of your product. And you can build models for several types of products. Like travel for me is very, very difficult. Just imagine you book one ticket a year. You're going to be an active user for only 1 year. And you can tell Shek, this does not work for travel. You can make it work for travel as well. And choosing a right platform to measure and instrument your metrics is really important. This is what a model can look like over a long period of time. This is one of the models that I used to build when I was at Zynga. My output of the model at the top was daily active users. So the more daily active users that were playing my games, the more successful my game was, right? And there were multiple things that added up to it. And some of those could be retention. How many of you know what retention means? Okay, quite a few of you. There are some metrics that are more complicated than retention, like return rates. It's actually a very important concept. Retention is too nebulous. It's too large. Return rate is extremely important. Return rate makes you define a cohort of users, right? You have a new user, right? A new user could be a cohort. A new user could be somebody that installed your product or started using your product in the last 7 days. Would you treat those people differently from people who have been using your product for a long time? Yes? No? Yes? Yeah, yes. If it's a new user, they don't know anything about your product, right? They're using it for the first time. You have to lead them through a completely different user experience than you would for somebody who has been using a product for a long time. So now, is there a metric that tells you that new users are liking your product? Retention kind of blends everything together, right? So that's why you have this concept of return rates. Now imagine if you can identify all your new users as one group. People who have started using your product in the last 7 days. Now they're returning at 10% week over week. So 100 people used your product last week, only 10 of them are using it this week. And this trend is going down. Like it used to be 15% 5 months ago, and now it's 10%. And it's going even down. So what happens to your growth model? Your growth model is going to project a decline in users, right? So imagine that you're splitting your growth model into 2 parts. New users who started using your product in the last 7 days, and repeat users who have been using a product for a long time. And if you look at these 2 groups and you have some way to measure return rates for each group, then you can project how many active users you will have over a period of time. And if your new user return rate has gone down from 15% to 10%, your product is failing. Now, as a product manager, you don't have to, throw spaghetti at a wall and see what sticks. You know exactly what the problem is. Your growth model tells you that every person that is installing your app, right, something happened in your product that is making them not come back. And this is a problem that I have faced several times. You create a MVP. Do you guys know what an MVP is? Yes, a lot of you know. So when you create an MVP for the first time, it's a very simple experience, right? Everybody can install, everybody can start, create an account, start using a product. It's extremely simple. And then you hire your next product manager, and then the next product manager, and then the next product manager. Soon you have a product that is extremely complicated. And when somebody creates a new account, product manager A sends a pop-up, right? And then says, this is the most important feature. You've got to use this. Product manager B sneaks in a notification in the top right corner. It's a bell that starts, pulsing. And it's like, you have 85 new alerts. Now you've created a confusing environment for a new user. Now as a GM, you're looking at new user return rates, and you notice that it's gone down from 15% to 10%. You know exactly which product manager to go talk to. No, you don't. So that's why you have to sort of build this model so that you can figure out how the different groups of users are using a product, and do you have a signal from them and a metric that you can measure that is telling you how your product is doing. So now that you know how to measure the core loop and you have a model for growth, how do you know you're moving towards success state? And what is success state? So success state is usually defined as a single metric, often termed the North Star metric. It could also be a bunch of metrics that is directly correlated with growth. Product teams set goals for success state and rally the team around these goals. That's what we do. An example is growing active users by 10% year over year, right? So your North Star metric is audience, active users. And you just realize that your new users are failing to come back to your product. Now, if your North Star metric is users, overall users, and a chunk of it is new users, you immediately know what the problem is, right? So you know that you're not going towards success state. The next step in this whole model is identifying which of those KPIs actually influence growth, right? And this is very important. There is no standard formula that says that these are the exact metrics or drivers that will influence growth. It completely depends on what stage your product is. And there are many stages that products could be in. You have the early stage, which is the exact example I talked to you about, right? You have a product that's an MVP, and you just launched it in the market. People are creating accounts, they're starting to use it. So if you look at all of your users, you have more number of new users, people who have started using a product in the last 7 days. That's really important. So you have to look at early retention and return rates of new users. A typical thing that I've seen with early stage companies that are pitching for more funding is they put a pitch deck and they say, my user return rates are amazing, through the roof, 90%. 100 users use my product this week, 90 of them come back the next week. The first question we ask them is, when did these guys start using a product? And then they'll be like, oh yeah, they've been using the product for a long time. Yeah, of course. Since they've been using the product for a long time, that's why they like it, and that's why they're coming back. What about new users? How are your new users doing? What's the return rate of people who started using a product 7 days ago? Oh, 5%. Sorry, no funding for you. It's not as simple as that, but I'm just trying to tell you that depending on the stage of your product, you have different metrics to look towards to figure out what is it that you can use to activate growth or influence growth. Now, most of us work in companies that either have a growth stage or a mature product. So in growth stage, you have to measure your core loop, right? How many people are playing a turn every day? How many people are posting to Facebook? How many people are posting a picture to Instagram? What's the long-term retention, right? Of those people that are starting to use your product in the last 7 days, how many of them have at least 10 friends, right? So you've got to start measuring those metrics when you're in a growth stage. And you have to start looking at early monetization. Just having free users, you fail as a product manager. You have to find some way that you can convert them and you can make a viable business out of it, right? Case in point, WhatsApp, Snapchat, etc., etc. And then in a mature product, when it's very difficult to add more new users, you have to think about optimization. There are several users that used to use your product, they stopped. Why? Can you get them back? That's called optimizing for lapsed users. And then there's this concept called lifetime value, which I'll come back to later. So what would you do in this scenario? This is a typical scenario that I walk my MBA classes through. You have product A that adds 100,000 new users every day and retains roughly about 5% of their users after 30 days. Somebody want to do the math? It's what, 100,000 users, only about 55,000 of them end up after a month. And then you have a product team that has identified two ideas for features. One of them increases virality. So virality is essentially, you're adding 100,000 new users every day. What if you give them like, oh, send this SMS to another person and you will get $3 off, right? For all food delivery applications, you have this incentive. So you could spend shit tons of money on that, right? You can spend $1 million and set up this incentive campaign that says, for every friend that you bring onto the platform, free food delivery for a week. Oh, you can blow up a lot of money. And then idea B is increasing long-term retention. Find out why is it that people are leaking. You could do either of these, right? Now let's say that in 1 quarter, let's say both those teams went and invested in each of their features. Now this is what happens to feature A. Feature A is, hey, I'll give you $5 for every new person that you bring on. So it hit 2.5 million users at the same long-term retention, right? Amazing growth. That's awesome. That's typically how early stage companies come and pitch to venture capitalists. Look at the crazy growth rate that we have. Within 1 quarter, we hit 2.5 million. And then team B only hit 2.1 million users. Their users are a lot more loyal, but their growth rate is very slow, right? It seems like feature A won. But let's see what happens in 1 year. So in 1 year, feature A hits 4 million users. That's unbelievable. That's awesome. They made it viral. Like every new user brought in 5 more users. The product is renowned. Everybody knows what the product is. It's similar to Pokemon Go. How many of you have played Pokemon Go? About 10 of you. Extremely viral. Now feature B hit 5 million users. They won in the long term because they focused on long-term retention. Now I'm not saying that feature B will always win. You have to kind of figure out what your product is. But the point here is you have to find your leverage and your horizon. You cannot think short-term and you cannot think extremely long-term. You have to find some sort of sweet spot that you can optimize towards. If you think too long-term, I have done several interviews with product managers that come and tell me, oh, I love creating 5-year roadmaps. Your customers don't know what they're going to do in 2 years. How can you create a 5-year roadmap? Right? So you have to find what that sweet spot is. And there is no direct answer towards it. Once you have identified leverage points, as a PM, you have to switch your hat, and now you have to prioritize ruthlessly. How many of you have got requests from customers saying, can you build that for me? Okay, half of us. At Qualtrics, we love building features for customers, but we also like to prioritize it to make sure that we are building features and investments that impact a lot of customers. So I'm a ruthless prioritizer. I reject 80% of the requests because I know that even customers may not end up using it. So you have to find out which ones to prioritize, which ones will lead to customer engagement and excitement, and which ones will actually drive your business forward. This is where the fun begins. We have a workshop completely dedicated for prioritizing and building a roadmap at the Qualtrics office, so we'll run through this. But in a nutshell, it's essentially you have done the first 3 steps and you have identified levers. Now you've got to rally your team. You have to create that ripple effect. You've got to include everybody else on a team to brainstorm on ideas and define and set goals. Now, I've seen a lot of brainstorming workshops that basically just throw a user problem at a bunch of people and say, let's go do this, right? And then all the designers in the room, the engineers in the room, everybody just brainstorm and come up with the most wacky idea. You have failed as a product manager. You've got to build some constraints around those ideas. You have to define what the goals are and you have to define the metrics that will drive towards those goals. And then there is prioritization, there's building, then you measure, and then you iterate, and then you find that 80% of your ideas fail, so you have to take those learnings back, add them back to your backlog, and then continue building and iterating. Now, a lot of times, so this is something that, so when I was teaching this a few years ago, an MBA student came up to me and asked me, hey Shek, how do you know like all of this leads to product success? So I decided to add a couple more slides that define a few of these metrics that relate to long-term success. How can you measure long-term success? There's this concept of a lifetime value. It's the revenue that your customer will bring to your company over their lifetime. To me, that's one of the fundamental North Star metrics that nicely bring everything together. It brings retention. Your customers are going to last lifetime with you only if you retain them, right? So questions like how long do your users retain? Is this improving with every new group that starts using a product? Is your 15% going to 20%? Or is it going to 10%, right? And then what's the average money that you're making with every user that you're bringing on? What % of your users convert to paying users? How much do they spend per day, per month? And you can find similar metrics in your own products. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but you can almost break it down to, are your users continuing to use your product? And are they so happy that they spend money with you, right? And these are the 3 core tenets that you can build a lot of hypotheses around. Engagement. Back to the concept that we defined, is the core loop, engagement getting stronger and stronger over time? Like it's really important. Is Shek playing 3 words per day last year, and now he's playing 5 words per day, right? That's a huge improvement in the core loop. I was posting 2 posts every day. Just imagine what's happening on Facebook right now. I can guarantee you that the average posts per day per user is declining. I can guarantee you that. And as a product manager there, I would be really worried because my core loop is weakening, and I have to find ways that I can improve it, right? And then retention. If retention is getting stronger, each same size cohort will generate more revenue over time. It's a simple concept. If 100 users were starting to use your product last week, right, and they generated $5 per day, right, and there is an average revenue that you're generating from that cohort, is that $5 increasing to 6, 7, 8? Or is it declining? So that's a very important concept. And then monetization, are they converting at the same levels or are they converting at higher levels? And if your average revenue per the user that starts using a product stabilizes or grows, it will lead to long-term success or lifetime value. So we talked about 4 things. Step 1, understand your core loop. And if you walk out of this presentation, this is the playbook that you take with you. And if you just use step 1, my job is done. Step 1 is the foundation. It's the most important Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's the foundation. If you get this right, as a PM, you'll have a lot of success. It's establishing the core loop. Step 2 is building a growth model, finding out which metrics you got to measure. Step 3 is not all metrics are treated equal. Some of them lead to growth. Some of them are just distracting. And step 4, prioritizing which product features to build and iterate and learn. All right. So ultimately, breaking customer signals into a suite of metrics and identifying key leverage points is vital for strategizing and building a roadmap for growth and for creating a habit-forming experience for your customers. Thank you.